Hi, everybody, and welcome. So, you are looking for part 2 of our March block of the month, week 3 video. You're in the right place. Or maybe you're brand new to our channel and you're interested in this idea of quilt as you go. Well, you're in the right place as well, because that's what we're going to do today. We're going to talk some more about a technique called quilt as you go. And I'm showing you a method. There are lots of methods for quilt as you go. But in all honesty, I find the one I'm showing you today to be less fiddly and less time consuming. But I think you're going to love it. Hi, everybody. My name is Diana, and I am the owner, educator, and designer here at Sew in Common. So I know a lot of you like this idea of quilt as you go, and I find it very useful for smaller projects. I personally have only ever done a couple full-size quilts as quilt as you go when I've been teaching classes. Because I like throwing my whole back on my quilt sandwich and doing my whole thing at once. But I know a lot of you, especially those of you that are newer to quilting, find that process intimidating and concerning. There's really no reason to be, but Quilt As You Go can give you the confidence you need to kind of move on. And I know if you're used to the idea of trying to do all of the quilting on your sewing machine with free motion, that like intimidates just about everybody. I'll tell you, I'm rubbish at free motion. I've worked on it and done it for years, and I never like anything I do. I've done quilts that way, but I don't like how they turn out. I don't feel like I'm any good at them. But here at Sew in Common, of course, we use our embroidery machine, and that's super easy. And the quilt as you go process lends itself to that as well, because you can do your pieces in more manageable chunks, I guess you would say, more manageable size blocks. So if you're new, or if you're wanting to learn a little bit about this technique, then that's what we're going to talk to you about today. And for those of you wanting to see the March block of the month, week 3, part 1 video, it's out there. And I apologize. I know that video is not the best in the world. I am super sick with allergies and cold right now. It's not the plague. It's not COVID. It's allergies and a cold. And today I actually got to put on some makeup because I'm on some medicine that allows me to do so. But as soon as this wears off, I have to take it all off because I've just not been in good shape for a couple of weeks now. Allergies have come really early here in Illinois. So it's the way it is. I have horrible allergies here in Illinois. Had them all growing up. Then my husband and I lived out on the West Coast in Seattle for like 20 some years, and I had no allergies at all. We moved back to Illinois, all the allergies came back. Oh well. That's life, right? So anyway, so I do apologize that other video is a little bit rougher than normal, but thank you all so much for your questions. And I did get a lot of comments and questions about wanting to see this method where you quilt everything all at once instead of adding your fabric on the back at the end, the way I was explaining in that other video. And that's fine. If that's what you want to see, that's what I want to show you for sure. I'm going to sneeze. Give me just a moment. Oh, excuse me so much. Oh. Again, allergies. I do apologize. Thank you. So anyway, enough of that. We're going to talk about this Quilt As You Go process, and let's get moving. Let's get going on that. Let's bring up my other camera. There we go. So I have a little sample here that I want to show you. I made this small with a single block so it would be easy to see under the light to give you part of the process. So yesterday, actually, let's look at this part, this block first. Yesterday, or in the first video, I showed you how to quilt just your block and the batting, and then sew on a very small edge all the way around to attach it to your backing fabric, and not to do a lot of other quilting that on the back, just kind of a stitch in the ditch idea. That I love that, but a lot of you don't. A lot of you want to see the quilting all the way through, and that's what we'll talk about today. So in this method that we're going to talk about today, this is going to be our quilt square, just as if it were a bigger pieced square, this diamond in a square. What you want to do is, now here again, I have used a fusible fleece. I like fusible fleece for smaller projects. If I were doing a full-size bed quilt, I would use a different type of batting. And I did talk about some of my favorite battings in that other video. So you might want to give that a try as well to see about those. So I have my pieced block on top of my batting, on top of my fabric. So I have a quilt sandwich here. Now, this particular method, you need to make sure that your batting and your backing fabric is 1 to 1.5 inches larger than your block is, than your pieced block. That's because you're going to need this fabric to make the binding and the sashing in this Quilt As You Go method. Okay, you're not going to need all of this batting, but we're going to trim that, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So once you have this together and it's in your embroidery hoop, you would take it to your embroidery machine. You would use a template, however you're going to line up your quilting design, and it would quilt out whatever you're going to have on here. Maybe you're going to have one beautiful design right in the center of that block, or you're going to do a stipple, whatever that would happen to be. You would do that. Then when you're done with that block, I just do all the blocks and get all the quilting part of them done. Then when I have all of my blocks done, I need to trim away this excess batting because we don't want it. We don't want it causing, if I were to start folding this over, look at all the bulk you would have in there. That's why you want to get rid of it. And here's how I do that. It's super simple. I just turn it over. Now I've just stitched this on. I take my backing fabric and I just fold it over all the way to where it's stitched and it can't be folded over anymore. Then I take a piece of my embroidery tape and I just put it on there. It doesn't have to cover the whole thing, just enough to hold it down. Then when I flip it back over, you can see here's my fabric, or my fabric way out here, and I'm going to be trimming here. So it's out of my way. So I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to lay it on my block, on the edge of my block, and take my regular rotary cutter and just trim that off. And you can see that when I undo that, there might be a little coming out here. That's fine, but it's not harming that backing fabric. And then I just move my tape around to my next side. And I'm going to do that now on all 4 sides just to get rid of this excess batting. Now, why do I have so much batting on in the first place? If you're already a quilter, you can tell us in the comments because I bet you know. But if you're new to quilting, the reason why you want some excess batting out here is sometimes in the quilting process, blocks and things can move and slide a little bit. And so you need to make sure that if something like that happens, you still have your batting out there. Now, that's another reason I like using this fleece for these smaller projects, this fusible fleece. So this side is rough and fused to my square. The reason I like it is because it keeps that from happening, because once it's fused on there, it's not going to move around on me at all. And now I'm just going to do my very last side. Oh, my eyes are starting to itch. My medicine must be wearing off. There we go. And now I'm just going to remove the tape all the way off. And now I have my fabric for my backing, but I don't have all of that extra bulk. And yeah, it's sticking out a little bit. That's not a problem. In fact, if you wanted to, if you have these corners like this, you could peel your backing fabric and then come in here and give that a little crossways cut there to trim that away as well. That will take some bulk out when we are doing the final steps. That's always a good idea. If you can take a little extra bulk out of those seams, go ahead and do it. In fact, we have a video on taking bulks out of seams where I give you my favorite go-to tips and tricks for that. So you please check that out as well. Okay, so now I would be ready to attach my blocks together and continue my process. So let's set this little guy aside and let's bring in my two larger blocks. So this is the one I showed you in video 1, and this is the one, the new one. Now I've used different backing fabrics. You would most likely use the same backing fabric. Now, if you wanted a really cool scrappy back and a scrappy border and binding and a scrappy looking sashing, then do different backing fabrics on these blocks. That could be super cute. Remember, there is no quilt police, so you can do what you would like. So what I've done here is I have my 2 squares done. And now what you do is you lay them with the backing fabric together, and you're going to need to make sure that the squares themselves are evened up and touching. And once I do that with a pin, I like to actually pin it on both ends just to keep things from getting out of hand, right? Keep that from moving around. Now this next part has to be done on the sewing machine. This really can't be done on the embroidery machine because you're dealing with pieces that are too big for our hoops. But then what you're going to do is go to your sewing machine, and you are going to take and sew right down the edge of the blocks, okay? Not on the block, just 1 stitch off the block, just right down that edge. And then when you're done stitching, you'll pull these pins out, or you can pull them out as you go if you like. I don't like sewing with pins in my stuff. I take them out as I go. And so then your blocks are attached, okay? And then you could add another one until your row is complete. And then you would add your, your rows together. So for finishing between the 2 blocks now, you can see on the back, now this was stitched down in that other technique. That's why you're seeing that square there. But you can see on the back of here, because I did it just like I showed you in this piece, here's all of my quilting. You get to see all the pretty quilting just like you want. Now let's talk about that for just a quick second. If you're going to do this technique where you want the quilting on the back, you may need to put a different color bobbin in your bobbin for the bottom stitching, which is going to show up on the back of your quilt. I just wanted it to disappear, so I used my white embroidery bobbin, which is a 60 weight polyester white thread. Now, would I do that for a full-size quilt? No. For a full-size quilt, I use a 40 weight thread on top and a 40 weight thread in the bobbin. But for smaller pieces, wall quilts, table linen, stuff like that, I use my embroidery bobbin. It works beautifully. It's perfectly strong enough thread, and it works lovely. And it really sinks in. So I don't like seeing my quilting jumping back out at me on the back. I don't feel, for me, it's necessary. So that 60 weight works perfectly. But you can always do a 40 on top and a 40 weight on bottom, and it's perfect. So our blocks are connected. Excuse me. But now we have to do something with these edges here, right? Well, this is pretty easy to do. But when you're doing Quilt As You Go, you need to literally follow each and every step. Don't skip, because then you end up with things sliding and getting out of place. So the very first thing I do when I go to finish my between each block is I take this to my ironing board and I press these open completely. So they're nice and flat. Now these aren't as flat as I would get them normally, but they're just really nice and flat. And then what I do is I just kind of fold one of them up so I can work right here. Then what I'm going to do with this one right here is I'm going to now take and fold it in just to my block line. Now let's talk about this. We want 1 inch to 1.5 inches all the way around from the outside of our block. I always leave an inch from my pattern to the outside of my block when I trim it. That way I'm not going to cut off any of my star points or any of my edges. So I always leave an inch on these four sides from the edge of the design out. And then my backing fabric is an inch to an inch and a half. And then all I'm doing here is folding that piece of fabric in towards the block, not over the block, just in towards the block. And then I press it, okay? You want to press it. You want it as flat as you can be, because then it's going to act nicely for you. And then I fold that in, just like you see here. And you probably will need to do a little bit of pinning here to hold it down. Or you can take it back over to your pressing station and just really press it flat. But I like just putting a couple of pins in here to get me started. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to put this so you can see it this way. Now what I'm going to do at my sewing machine is I'm going to start up in the corner, right on the edge, as close to the edge as I can get with my quilting thread, and I am going to stitch all the way down. That's how I do my binding on all of my quilts on my machine. In fact, let me grab, let's see, this one will work. On this little table topper that I showed you in the other one, see, you can really not even see my binding thread. It is, my binding thread. It is stitched right on there, all the way down. I always stitch my binding from the front. I never stitch it from the back. That way, when I'm stitching on my machine, I know exactly where I'm going. I get it as close to that edge as I can, and I have no problems whatsoever. We'll talk about binding in another video sometime, about different techniques you can use, but I really like that, to stitch it right on from the beginning. I spent a lot of years hand stitching on my binding, and once I realized I could do it on my sewing machine, I've never done hand binding again. I know there are people that love it and won't do anything else. That's perfectly fine, because it's your quilt and you can do what you like. But you want to just stitch all the way down with your machine. Please, if you're going to do this technique, don't start hand binding all of these sashings. This will take you forever if you do. Then once you have that side done, you would open up your other side and do the same thing. You're going to press your fabric, fold it over, and press it. And then you would pin it, and again, you would stitch it right on the edges. And then, I know they're different. I did them in different fabrics so that you could see each side. But then, as you can see, you're going to have a nice little sashing right down the center. Give it a nice press. Now, you would do that between, so you do that over here in whatever block is over here. And you do it over here in whatever block is over here. And at 10-inch blocks, 10.3, if you did 4 of those in a row, you're going to have a 40-inch width quilt. That's a nice little size. And then when it comes to doing your rows together, you do the same thing. Now, you're going to say, oh, look, there's that extra fabric there. And there is, and that's part of the deal when you do when you do Quilt As You Go. Now you can, if you want, come in here, my snips, and you can snip just a little bit of that out to give yourself less bulk. Again, the techniques I show you in how to reduce bulk would help you there. But then just know that with this technique, when you fold it, those edges there are going to be a little bit bulky. You're going to sew over them, because once you do all of your stuff together, this would be your outermost binding, right? Your needle will sew right over that. It's not that thick, okay? But I just want you to know you'll have a tiny bit of bulk there, just a tiny bit. And then you would do that all the way around your quilt until it was completely finished. So that is the technique for for Quilt As You Go when you want to do your quilting on the back and the quilting on the front. So let's move this piece out of the way again and bring back in our small sample and just review that idea. Your block should be about, now this isn't 1 inch out because this particular block wouldn't be quilted this way because it's part of a bigger block. But if this were my block, I always go from my point out on my block before I trim about 1 inch to make sure that I have enough space, just like you see here. From here to here is 1 inch, from here to here is 1 inch, from here to here is 1 inch, and here to here is 1 inch. That way you can tell when I do my sashing and my binding, I'm not going to hit my lovely points, and you're going to see this big, beautiful star complete. It's not going to have chopped off points. So your batting and your backing fabric should be 1 to 1.5 inches from the outside edge of your trimmed block. Now, this one is about 1.5 inches on this particular block. If I were just doing something this small, I would definitely do it at 1 inch, because look, at 1.5 inches, I'm going to go in there and lop off those. And you don't want to do, some people I see do a double roll like this to make that small, but then you get a lot of thickness and a lot of bulk that you don't want to have to deal with. Okay. So you trim away your excess batting at the end just by folding this back and putting some tape there and then trimming the batting. And then you're set to go to put them together. And whatever you do in here for your quilting is, of course, completely up to you. Then you take it and you put them together, and then you lay back your sashings. And see, if you don't, this is why I say with this technique, you really need to follow each step. If I were just to do this with my fingers like this, you can see that not everything is lined up. It's a little bit wibbly. And that's where the pressing comes in to really help you get a nice flat surface at those joins. Okay. In fact, next week, our 4th week of the month, where I show you the video or the process for doing the project for this month's block of the month, I am going to put that project together using this technique so that you can see a full-size piece done with this technique. Okay, so that should make those of you who want to see that happy, that's how I'm going to do this month's project, because I want you to be able to see that. Okay, folks, I hope that helped. Sorry, I'm just trying to catch my breath from being ill. So I hope that helped answer your questions on the technique for Quilt As You Go. This is the simplest and least fiddly Quilt As You Go technique in how I did this together as a full quilt sandwich. Other techniques out there, you're welcome to go and look at some other videos and all if you want, but they require you to cut sashing pieces, measure things, add in extra batting and stuff in the sashing so you don't have like just 2 pieces of fabric between your blocks and stuff. It's a lot more work. It's a lot more fiddly. I like doing this self-sashing because with this sash the way I've done it and bound the way I did it, I don't need any extra batting because all of it is in the block itself. So I love this technique. When I Quilt As You Go, this is the technique that I will use for next week. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it answered your questions. I hope you all get out there and do some this week. I've already got pictures coming in to show you guys next week. We have one of our viewers. She has been going crazy with doing her half square triangles only and creating different blocks. And she's done some beautiful ones. I can't wait to show them to you. Of course, if you want to post your photos at our Facebook page, it's sewincommon.com on Facebook. You can post your pictures there. Or if you'd like to post them wherever you post your pictures, your Instagram, your Facebook, whatever, in your comments, just put @SewUncommon and #SewUncommon. That way I can find those photos and share those as well. Now, if you don't want us to see your work, that makes me sad because everybody's quilting is beautiful. Piecing is beautiful. So please share. Don't be shy. Like I said, there's absolutely no judgment here. So we're all here to learn and to have fun together. So those are ways you can post your photos where I can see them and show them next week, which is the 4th week of March already. Can you believe it? I mean, literally, I was thinking about this earlier. It seems like I just did the 1st week video yesterday. I mean, it's crazy. So next week is the 4th week, and that means live Q&A. So we meet here on YouTube and Facebook, 2 p.m. Central Standard Time here in the U.S. For our live Q&A. I show you the project that we're going to make from this month's star and February star. Both of them are going to end up being in this month's project. So if you haven't gotten your February crossover star yet, go grab your pattern for that on the website. Remember, all of the patterns for the block of the month are on the website and they're free. You get your digital files for piecing on the embroidery machine, and you get all your written instructions and any templates, pictures, anything like that that you need. So go grab those because you'll need them for this month's project. And we will see you then at the Q&A. You can go ahead and start sending me questions at my email if you want, Diana@sewuncommon.com. If you don't want to ask them during the live, that's okay. You can go ahead and start sending them, and I'll show those and we'll get those answered. So first part of the live is the intro to this month's project. We talk about that for a little bit. We'll take any live Quilt As You Go questions as well, because remember, if you have that question, somebody else might have that question, and it's more people will hear that answer if you ask it live. So, or if you send it in for me to show it during the live. And then at the end, we'll do after we've done the project and all, we'll do all of the Q&A. Okay, everybody. So thank you so much. Hopefully I will be much better. I will go get some rest. And thank you all so much. And until next time, what do I always tell you? Go sew life beautiful. Bye for now, everybody.